Hey, today I'll be teaching you how to read people's personality traits based on patterns in their eye movements. Starting off, we'll look at what are the different kinds of eye movement patterns that people tend to exhibit and what you can tell about these kinds of people. Next, we'll go into tips of how to make this kind of information useful when interacting or dealing with people. We'll follow that up with some guides on how to practice this and to remember to even use this in real life. And then finally, there's a little bonus for you at the end. The first eye movement pattern we'll call direct gaze with seeing. These people look at you very closely and very directly, and it's almost like they're saying everything that they know very well and don't even have to think about, and oftentimes they'll have creepily long amounts of direct eye contact. So on average, the people who disproportionately exhibit this kind of eye movement pattern are going to heavily weight information on past experiences, traditions, things like that. They tend to be very law-abiding and also very reliable people. If they say they're going to get something done, you can trust them. The next one we call direct gaze without seeing. This is an example of somebody who has a direct gaze without seeing. It's almost like they're lost in time and space and they're having some sort of deep revelation at every moment of every day. People who exhibit this sort of eye pattern tend to be a lot of the drivers of innovation, deeper truths in science and society. These kinds of people also tend to curiously pursue information until they have their answer and then stop there without seeking out more data necessarily. They tend to prefer the big picture to the details. And they're very abstract thinkers who tend to go for things based on whether they think it's a good idea, not if it's something that's necessarily proven. The next eye tracking pattern is constant motion with seeing. These kinds of people are actually seeing, feeling, hearing things in the present moment while they're speaking. They're very immersed in the world. They're more likely to notice your eye color, who farted, any sort of information that's in the present moment. These kinds of people tend to, on average, be more quick-witted and playful. They give a lot of decision-making priority to really present facts and not quite as much on long-term thinking. These people are also more drawn to sense pleasure, where they're going to appreciate or value food, beautiful pictures, things like that more than the average person. And the last pattern is constant motion without seeing. These kind of people, when they're speaking, it's like their eyes are moving around a lot, but they're not really looking at anything in particular. So these kind of people's eye movements are helping their brains forge connections, and it's almost like they're discovering a lot of abstract things in real time. They tend to be a lot more creative and have a preference for breadth rather than depth. These people tend to bounce from idea to idea and pinging a lot of things for different answers, and they get into really deep tunnels where they could end up in any different kinds of place, often losing sight of the original question that encapsulated them as they get lost in their curiosity. Now for a disclaimer. Everybody does all of these things, but everybody does have a preference. And out of these kinds of people, it's going to be really easy to see in about half of the population, but in about the other half of the population, they're going to be more balanced and it's going to be harder to detect. But with enough training, you can actually figure these kinds of things out, and that's what I'll teach you now. There really is an infinite amount of applications for this sort of information. But one thing that I know is that the people with the more direct gaze, whether it's zoned out or directed at you, tend to be more concrete with their information, so you can kind of trust with more exactness the sort of things that they're telling you. Alternatively, if they're one of the kinds of people whose eyes move around a lot looking at things, or abstractly, these kinds of people, you're going to have to work harder to hold their attention because they're going to be bouncing from thing to thing and want a lot more stimulation. If you're dealing with one of the abstract thinkers, or the people who aren't really seeing things in reality all the time, then it's good to brainstorm or to fact-check ideas with one of the more literal, reality-based thinkers. Because the abstract thinkers might create elaborate ideas, but be short on facts or not have those things fit reality all the time. Likewise, if you're one of the more literal thinkers based in reality with a direct gaze at a person or in your environment, it's good to also check the patterns that you're seeing with the abstract thinkers because they're going to be more accurate at forging the connections between the data and helping you decide patterns or figure things out. If you're talking to one of the abstract thinkers, start with the big idea first, because if you don't do that, they're going to be constantly trying to find out what are the bigger underlying patterns, and they're going to stop paying attention as they try to fill this need in their brain. So start with the big picture, because their brains go A, B, C, Z, skipping all the letters in between. And if talking to the concrete thinkers, start with the details first, and then draw your conclusions and your patterns. Because without these details first, if there's a hole in the information, they're not going to trust or understand the conclusions you make. And again, there's an infinite amount of tips that you could even discover for yourself. But without actually applying this information, it's useless. So here's some tips on that. So the first thing is you have to figure out how to even remember to apply this. It could just be having focus. A trick that I use is I have a ring that I'll switch to a different finger. So I notice the difference and then I think, why is that there? And then I think, oh, it's because I'm supposed to be tracking and paying attention to people's eye movements. So a few times throughout the day, this will bring awareness to practicing the skill and being aware of it. Another note is to try not to have too many things that you're tracking at once, because then you just lose track of the things that you're tracking. It's better to have one or two main things in mind that you're trying to improve on, so you can keep those focused and more on the top of your mind. And the last tip is to let other people speak more. This is because when you're speaking, all your attention is in your own head and how you're being perceived and what you're saying. But when other people are speaking, it's easier to see and notice the patterns that are happening more with their eyes, and you'll be able to pick these up a lot more with your own peace of mind. If you want to learn more about this system, to be able to get even deeper insight into people, or to know a tip on how to speed read people, you can check out other places on this channel where we've gone into personality archetypes. And now for the bonus time. If you haven't already guessed, these eye movement patterns actually map out quite a lot to the 16 personality types. Now for the kinds of direct seers with the direct eye contact, these are mostly going to be ISTJs and ISFJs, and to a lesser degree ESTJs and ESFJs. For the people with the more of a zoned outlook, these are going to be INTJs and INFJs, with a lesser degree of the ENFJs and ENTJs. For those whose eyes are in constant motion looking at things, these are going to be ESFPs and ESTPs, and again with this pattern, to a lesser degree with ISTPs and ISFPs. And lastly, the people with the wild eyes that move around a lot while they're talking, these are mostly going to be ENFPs and ENTPs, and to a lesser degree in INTPs and INFPs. So now you have this new tool that you can use to understand people's personalities and that you can apply in a lot of different useful ways, but remember to practice. And if you're into the Jungian personality systems, the 16 personalities, this can also help you to get quicker and deeper understandings of what people's types are and be able to get even far deeper understandings of who you're dealing with in real life. A lot of these eye tracking movements are very related to the kinds of jobs and activities that people enjoy. And if you're a gamer, this can also be used a lot in helping you figure out the kinds of games you'll enjoy or even people you enjoy playing with. If you want to use an app to help you discover these kinds of people based on their personality types or eye movements, and if you want to be able to discover games that you'll like based on personalized recommendations with machine learning and people similar to you, then you can download the GameTree app that we've developed for this purpose. And there's a description for that and there's a link for that and there's a link for that in the description below. See you next time.